It looks like we're live. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic start to your week. A little bit of a change of scenery, so I am actually out of town, bringing to you guys a fairly rare out-of-town show, which is kind of fun to do. Get to hang out with you guys while I am away on business. So what I wanted to talk to you guys tonight is, what is your pain point when it comes to modifying a vehicle, especially when we're talking about, well, Mopars? Because you know you're going to be paying that Mopar tax, and that's the biggest issue that you've got to look into. Slash, what's up, man? You're first in. But the big thing is, so I get so many questions about exhaust. I get a lot of questions about gearing. I get a ton of questions about tuning, forced induction, cams, headers, the whole bit. The list goes on and on and on. And I think that one of the biggest key issues is cost when it comes to modifying one of these modern cars. And it's, what's up, Kobe? Boosting him, he's got the high B with the arm flex. I like it. Jesus is in and say, hey, Mr. Mason, what's up, Jesus? So one of the issues that you have to look at is just cost in general. What is your real threshold for paying when it comes to paying for some of these mods and what you get out of the mods? And for a lot of guys, it's really not about the money. Or let me rephrase that. The amount of money spent isn't really being spent for a specific result. You're really more spending the money and you're doing these things to your car because it's fun to do. It gives you something to do. It keeps you involved in the lifestyle and the hobby, however you want to look at it. But other guys get really roped into the marketing, and they get roped into some other, I don't even know what you would call it, but the fact of the matter is that they come in with, maybe due to the marketing of some of these products, a little bit unrealistic expectations. So for tonight, I wanted to talk about not only what modifications cost, really what you're going to be into this modification for, but what kind of a result can you realistically see? And so I'll do this kind of a video every once in a while just to kind of do a re-up for anybody that may be new to the channel and you're thinking about spending all this money. This is going to be a good opportunity for you to kind of get an idea for the money you're going to spend versus what you're going to get for that cash. And in the course of all this, obviously, guys, if y'all have questions about mods, what it's going to cost, what you're going to get, go ahead and post those up as well. So I'm going to check in with you guys, and then we're going to get started. Randy's saying, good evening, Mr. M, checking in from Middle Tennessee. What's up, Randy? Slash checking in saying, after cutting off mufflers and resonators, any weight loss I can possibly do, that's where the pain actually begins. Man, Slash, if you've cut off resonators and mufflers, the pain's already started in your eardrums. I think it's going to be loud. Tim saying, my advice, if you want to mod your scat pack, just tread it in on a red eye. Might be onto something there. Mark saying, hey, Mason, also could be a placebo effect, but after I did my mid-muffler delete, I felt a little bit more punchy. It might have been a little bit of a placebo effect there, but you're into the car, you're having fun with it. That's really all that matters. By the way, we're rocking the decaf this evening in the hotel room. So let's get started where I always like to get started with this video, which is front of the car. We're going to start with cold air intakes. Most guys coming from the old school will tell you, oh, you've got to run a cold air intake. The stock cold air intake or the stock intake is so restrictive, not going to get you any gains, all of that. So if you have an RT or a 392, just get a Hellcat cold air setup. Just get the lower air box and the snorkel if it's a Challenger. If you've got a Charger and it doesn't have the snorkel's already in the grill, it's a train wreck to try to do all that. Just, I don't know what to tell you about that. But if you've got a Charger, stick with what works. Get the Hellcat filter, throw it in there. If you've got a Charger, just throw the Hellcat filter in your stock box, and you'll be in pretty good shape there. As far as money that you're going to spend, you'll be less than $150, $175 for that Mopar part. For the $400 or whatever you're going to spend on whoever else's cold air kit, just remember that it's not going to pick up any power. I don't care what the sound is, because it will pick up some sound. But on the NA cars, you're really not going to pick up any power. I have proven over and over and over again that unless you're really working with some obnoxious pulley ratios, we've proven that even with a 985 upper and running on boostane and a car running in the 970s, that a separate cold air kit did absolutely nothing to gain any performance with that vehicle going down the drag strip. So I get it that that's a forced induction application. You get a lot of folks saying that, well, the NA cars are different. They pick up X number. No, they don't. They don't. And not the Mopars. You put the Hellcat airbox in there with a Hellcat filter, you'll be just fine. And it'll be the least amount of money. And as far as what you'll gain from it, yeah, it's, I don't know, 5 horsepower. How about that? It's hard to really quantify because the real test is taking it to the drag strip. The problem with cold air kits is that they do, if they're going to pick up any power only on the dyno when you've got the hood wide open, fans blowing cold air all over this filter, which ain't happening on the street. And that's where the marketing comes into play. First of all, it won't make near the power that they're claiming. Up to 25 horsepower means it includes 0 to 25 horsepower at a max. And you'll be doing great to pick up 5 or 6 on a dyno, only to have it possibly get slower at the drag strip. That's never any fun, especially when you spend hard-earned money on a part that's not doing you any favors. So stay away from that stuff. If you got a Hellcat, one of the forced induction cars, mainly the Hellcat, because everything else comes with an open element. If you've got a Hellcat, you want to run that type of system for some noise, that's great. But again, we've proven that that airbox with a stock filter will go deep into the 9s and won't even have any benefit from switching over to those cold airs. So with the cold air thing out of the way, I'm going to take some more of y'all's questions and then I will get back into it. Patrick's saying, good evening, B Mason. Good evening, Patrick. So far, I'm saying I spent about $2.5 grand on performance mods, intake, catback, ported 18 manifold, and tires got me a bunch of great performance, probably gained a good 40 wheel horsepower. Now I'm on the cosmetic side. Nice. And that's going to be part of the discussion is the sum worth more than the whole of its parts? So we'll see. We'll kind of look into that too. It's a good point. Kobe's saying he spent $1,300 on a 309 gear. That's actually not bad. For the gear and install. Mark saying cold air intakes are probably at the top of my first car mod list. Of course it is. It's the one everybody can do. I mean, it's an 8mm wrench and you're good to go, right? And you can see your results. You don't even have to get your hands dirty. Just know that if you're doing it for performance, don't, because that's not going to get you any performance. If you're doing it for a visual pop, that's a different story altogether. And those that aren't in the know see that kind of thing and they go, oh man, it's got performance mods. Okay. But the reality is that it's not going to get you a ton, but it looks good. And for the supercharged guys, for the Hellcats, just, think of it more like a, it's adding to the theater of the car, just hearing the sound, hearing the blower, that might be worth the cover charge, and you just let it ride that way. Let's see. Randy's saying, brother, if I actually got all the horsepower that was claimed from adding various parts and pieces to my 392, it'd be the baddest in the land. Pretty much. Boosted to me saying I ran 138.6 miles an hour, quarter mile at 5,000 feet and 1,400 DA. That's a cold ass day for 5,000 feet. With the stock airbox and a paper filter on C16. That's about right. I mean, we've gone basically the same good air. We've gone over 140 with that paper filter and a stock airbox like it's nothing. And then AC saying, I just got this SRT 392. What fun mods do you suggest that I do to it? So we're going to get to these, but I would say first and foremost, put a tire on that thing. Get a set of, even though I don't like the look of them, I would say go with the Nitto 555 R2s for the rear. Stock size will be fine. Yours is an SRT. So I thought they quit making the SRTs from 21. Anyway, if it's got a 9.5-inch wheel, stick with the stock size. If it's got the 9-inch wheel, you can still get away with a 275. What is it? 275 40 for the rears. They still fit pretty good on those rims. Just keep in mind that those Nittos do run a little bit wide. Not that big of a deal if you're only talking about a 275, but can be a big deal if you start getting to the 305 size. Some tires you can run the 305 on those rims. Those Nittos I certainly wouldn't, because they do run about 1/2 inch too wide. But first and foremost, get a tire on it. Can't really do much if you can't put the power to the ground. Booty Sandy went with a leg maker, nice quality, added 10 mental horsepower. I like it. I tell you one thing about the leg maker, for the Hellcat, it's probably the rowdiest sounding of all the intakes. In fact, I have half a mind to put a leg maker on my car just because I want the noise. And that's enough of it for me. I'm really getting more into the theater of what the car brings to the table in terms of, you know, just the overall experience. The thing is I guess with me is, after you've driven everybody's super fast hot rod and have done the data logging, I was the guy that got all the initial logs, the final logs, all the high load testing, which, you know how that goes. That's always kind of a little bit of a white knuckle thing. Not really white knuckle, I guess is the wrong way to say it. But with me, I was always wearing basically a lab coat. And the cars that I had fun testing were not always the fastest. In fact, they were never the most fun, because those cars would gather up real estate at an alarming rate. I mean, we're talking about cars that are putting well over 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100 horsepower to the rear wheels. And I've got to do a high load test to data log the thing. And that high load test on the street could mean a roll into the throttle in 5th gear, when the car would haze the tires in 5th gear with drag radials. So your 5th gear, roll into the throttle, 6th gear, and that would begin the pull. And the miles per hours gather up really quickly. But you're looking at data. You might as well be flying the space shuttle at that point. But the cars that always caught my attention were the more simple, a little bit more basic combinations that always ran really well, but I never got the impression they were trying to kill me. And they always had some fun sounds going on with them. Products like, or, combinations like Revlon, where you've got a 309 gear, maybe a cold air, a solid tune, a little bit of exhaust work. That was always one of my favorite to drive. And that's where Revlon is going to spend her time with me. So, but yeah, the cold air really more for the theater aspect for your Hellcats. Some Ferrari guy saying, built my car for roller races, and with my JLT cold air intake, my IATs are usually only 5 degrees over ambient. Yeah, on the road, all of them are low when it comes to IATs. All of them are low. It's when you stop, when you're at a dead stop, that's when IATs start to really climb fast with those kits. And, if you're at a drag strip, you're cruising around on the street, up and down Main Street, your under air temps are going to be nuts. Your inlet air charge temps are going to be crazy until you whack the throttle and get the thing up to highway speeds for an amount of time. At that point, then yeah, temperatures drop and you're back to basically ambient, so no big deal. But that's about what you're going to be looking at. Oh, by the way, yeah, costing on those cold airs, I think I may have mentioned it, but about $400, give or take some amount of money either way. $50 plus or minus will get you into one of those things. And again, like I said, horsepower minimal. Next, what we got to talk about, because we're going to go from the front of the car to the back of the car. So we talked about the cold air. Now let's talk about intake manifold porting and throttle bodies. This is something that's a little bit near and dear to my heart, because I do porting for manifolds, and I don't port the throttle bodies, but I prep the manifolds and open them up for the bigger throttle bodies. In my testing, if you've got a 392, about the best hope that you have for really increasing flow at all is to open up the throat to accept basically an 84 and 85 millimeter throttle body. The shape of that throat, from y'all's point of view, it kind of comes in down and then around, and it kind of makes this little jog where it comes down like this and around. Not that awesome for flow, and I've got to put most of my time when I'm porting a manifold, and any of the reputable porters out there will tell you the same thing. We're spending almost all of our time just reshaping the throat, and some of the castings are thicker, some are thinner, and you got to be real careful with that polymer that you don't go too thin. But we're basically reshaping the throat of that thing just to accommodate a slightly, and I mean slightly larger throttle body. Most of us will do a little bit of work on the runner side. Think of it kind of like port matching, but it's really not port matching because there's no gasket to gasket match to. So the next best thing would be port matching, but you're really not port matching these manifolds. That's actually pretty difficult to do. There's really no template to do it because, again, there's no gasket. So most of us will open that up a little bit, take any of the ridges out of it, and just basically blueprint that manifold, which is what you need to understand about porting an intake manifold. The best way that I can explain it is that I am blueprinting the manifold, making the manifold, in other words, flow and act the way that the engineers would have wanted it to or would have hoped for it when the engine was designed. How much power does it pick up? Well, that all depends on what shape your manifold's in when that porter gets it. So the throttle body itself plus the manifold, I've picked up pretty decent amounts of power with it. But those decent amounts of power gains were on manifolds that weren't all that great. I think the walking around agreed to value number is somewhere around 6 or 7 horsepower. And that might be being a little bit generous. But one thing you will get is better throttle response, and they almost always pick up a nice little chunk of torque down low, if not horsepower. So anyway, know that coming into it. And you'll find that that trend may present itself a few times again where you're picking up more torque than you are horsepower. The primary reason for that is that when you are messing with an intake manifold that's basically got runners that are this freaking long, they're going to be stacking air for torque. And when you go to the short runner mode on those manifolds, that runner's still about that long, which in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's shorter than your long runner mode, but it's still not like some baby velocity stack or anything like that. So, but you'll still carry decent power with those things, but it's not a huge difference. You're actually, it shorts it down to about like that. So it's still really not a short runner. But again, word to the wise, that's really what you're looking for. And really the guys that take their time and open them up and put a lot of work into it, I know it's myself and a couple of other guys that I know of that really do try to get the most out of those things. We spend almost all of our time on the throat side trying to get that just right. But what will that cost you? Well, this is where things start to get a little bit pricey. You can do your own labor for your cold air. But when it comes to your manifold, the one thing that you need to do is just remember that you do have that short runner actuator on the back of the manifold. So you need to remove the manifold. In essence, you're going to pull that manifold forward and then disconnect that connector on the back side. Just don't forget to do that. If you forget to do that and you got to pull the thing off, it's going to grab that connector. Might break something. So don't forget your short runner actuator. But, usually labor to pull a manifold might be half an hour or so, $50, $75, something like that. And then the cost to port the manifold is usually somewhere around $400, give or take. So for about $450, $500, you'll have this ported manifold or blueprinted manifold, and throttle body would be extra. You're looking at usually around $350, $450 for that. So you're still looking at about $900 for the whole kit. So it sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it is a supporting mod. And this is, again, going back to the previous comment. A lot of times you've got to do everything to get a benefit out of all. It's like teeth in a cog. That without one tooth, that cog doesn't work, even if all the rest of the teeth are perfect. So again, sum is worth the whole of the parts. White Knuckles saying, hit that like button. Yeah, hit the like button. Don't forget, if you guys are new to the channel, don't forget to hit the like button. subscribe, make sure you hit the bell icon, all that kind of good stuff if you like what you're hearing. Boost is saying, I might put a JLT intake for the wine. Good idea. That's why I would do it to mine. I'm thinking about going with a leg maker, man. I mean, Chris has got awesome customer service. The product sounds amazing. It's the rowdiest sounding one that I know of. Tim Fastcar is saying, Scat Pack, good for around town with 11-to-1 compression, but the red eye is the ticket. Wine from the screw will scare everyone. They do sound good, provided you can make them hook on the street. Some Ferrari guy saying, I figured it was a nice combo for more air for the ported 18 manual to flow up that much more. That's true. And with other modifications, that manifold will really start to help quite a bit. One thing I can tell you is on a stock cammed car, and this is just kind of one of those things that you discover along the way when you start messing with these things. With these Mopars, one of the weird things about them is that just because something doesn't seem to show up on a dyno doesn't mean that it's not working. We've seen some cars with, Hellcat airbox, long tubes, ported manifold and a bigger throttle body, or ported, like a Fastman ported throttle body, or like a Dr. Diff 85 millimeter. You see them just running better. Like they do run significantly better, even though the dyno results will just kind of have you scratching your head. I never have been able to understand that. A good example of that is Quick Break's car. If you're not familiar with his car, that's the one. He's buddies with Racer X, a friend of mine as well. It's a 4,650 pound land barge of a Charger SRT. And that car, with obviously it's got a cam in it, but again, the car is fast, and it picked up quite a bit just with bolt-ons, even though the dyno wouldn't really agree with that as much. So anyway, kind of an interesting tale, but I digress. I'm kind of getting off topic here. Imagine that. Oh, Sam's saying he doesn't know why there's no convertible Challengers from the factories, because they don't sell really well. He's saying, I already upgraded the wheels, 10.5 rear, 10 up front with 315 Nittos on the rear, 285s up front. What's next? Depends on what you want to do, man. A tune, maybe. Boo Sammy saying, will a larger throttle body help my Hellcat? I'm at 823 wheel horsepower. That is a great question. Fortunately, brother, I don't know what to tell you. 823, I'm guessing you're on a dyno jet. I tell you something, the jury's out for me. I am the guy that had dyno tested a throttle body from Fastman on a buddy of ours car. In fact, it's the one with the 285 pulley I was just talking about. And we had picked up some torque, but not a lot of horsepower with that thing. And I'm still trying to figure out, there's some questionable dyno hoosafudge going on there. But I will tell you that it wasn't a super expensive mod, and I think that the gains were legit. Now, here's the thing. Throttle response was better, and it seemed to pick up torque on the dyno, but the question that you probably have is, how does that translate to the drag strip? It didn't. That's the problem. It just did not translate to the drag strip. And again, granted, this was at stock boost, but we couldn't find any gains there. And because we had been running Bravo packages with stock throttle bodies, making 800 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno and going out and running 950s with that, we couldn't get any gains out of them even in those packages. So it's good for a tip-in torque, and it's good for everything that has everything to do with drivability. So in fact, let's talk about long tube headers now, because this is almost going to walk in lockstep with the Hellcat guys. The throttle body you may pick up torque with the same way you pick up bottom end torque with a set of long tube headers. Don't expect to pick up any horsepower. In fact, you guys that are naturally aspirated with the stock cam, expect to maybe lose a little bit of power up top. Now, I'm not talking about bleeding power to death. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is maybe a horsepower, or more to the point, it just won't be able to carry power for as long as it can with the shorter tube headers. It's just a function of the fact that you're dealing with long ass tube headers, which are in themselves a restriction at some airflow value. However, before that, it promotes scavenging, and in those cars naturally aspirated down low, it will help scavenging. So I will say that if you're thinking about putting long tubes on your car, and you guys that have been around the channel for a while have heard me say, don't put long tubes on your car. I'm not going to say that I've had a change of heart. I just have to tell you how much these things cost, right? So when I tell you how much they cost, and the fact that you could lose horsepower, that's usually not the direction guys are looking to go. But for long tubes, we'll talk about that first, and I'll get into the reason why it kind of walks in lockstep with throttle bodies for Hellcats. With a long tube, you're going to pick up some torque, but more importantly, you pick up partial throttle torque, that partial throttle tip-in torque, that transitional power, the power enrichment phase is what, us, fart sniffing guys that know tuning will tell you. But you're going to see a gain there. You're going to feel a gain there, I should say. On the dyno, you might pick up 6 or 8 foot-pounds of torque down low. And that gain will diminish as your RPMs increase. So in that respect, is a little bit of torque worth it? Well, I can tell you that just driving the car, my butt dyno would argue that it is in fact worth it. So how much is it going to cost for this is worth it mod? Well, this is where things start getting pricey. A set of headers is going to cost you, let's say $1,500 for a set of Cook's long tubes. Really good fitment, real pretty product. Cook's can't really go wrong with those. So I think $1,500 or $1,700 gets you the Cook's long tubes with a set of metal substrate, high flow catalytic converters. Do not get ceramic, only go with the metal substrate. From that, you're going to need to probably get somebody to install it. These cars have, as big of a car as they are, they have very little to no room underneath the hood. And so you're going to need somebody, obviously, with a lift and some know-how and some experience to get these things in. Believe me, guys, this ain't your freaking dad's or granddad's Fox body. This is absolutely going to drive you nuts. Go ahead and break out that green wrench, let it do the work for you. You're probably looking at about, 4 or 5 hours is what you'll probably get billed. That's gonna be about $400 or $500 to have them installed. So figure about $2,000, but there's a catch. See, before we really get started with the rest of these mods, we got to start talking about tuning, and realistically, to do any real substantial modifications to the car that is going to be worth it, you're going to have to get the car tuned. And this is where stuff gets obnoxiously expensive for things that you can't see, that you cannot open in a box. So what does it cost to tune the car? Well, typically you're looking at about $750 to $950 for the tune. And you are looking at another $400 for transmission tuning if you have an automatic transmission car. Sounds like a lot, and it is, but let me tell you what you get. You get access to your car's computer, which can be more valuable than the rest of the mods that you do to the car. Plus, you can personalize it from a drivability standpoint, things like that. So, yeah, it's going to have to get done. Oh, crap. Then I forgot the $250 unlocking fee, and then you've got the trip. The round trip's about $100. That's about $350. Call it, even if you got a deal on it at $750, that's about $1,100, $1,200, give or take, is what you're looking at. So, yeah, you're going to have to get it done. How much power do you pick up with a tune? Damn, this is going to be depressing. Little to none for the Mopars. You're going to look at about 15 horsepower and about the same in torque. But if your tuner does it right, then you'll be able to see that result literally the entire spectrum of the power band. And again, that's going to get you more in the quarter mile along with a sticky tire than pretty much the rest of the mods that you're going to do to this car anyway. You'd be surprised, even though with everything that you do to the car, and we've talked about long tubes, the costs associated with that, tuning, cold air. Haven't really talked about pulleys because a lot of guys don't want to get that invasive with their car, but there are pulleys out there that you can look to pick up, 6 or 8 horsepower to the rear wheels with. And again, you're still looking at a pretty decent chunk of change there. With labor, you're probably looking at $600 or $800. As you can see, this is adding up very quickly. And even if you were to just add all the manufacturer's claimed numbers, you're not picking up a ton of money or a ton of power for the amount of money that you're laying down. So just something to remember when it comes to those decisions that you're looking to make with making the mods to your modern Mopar. So now that we've got the cold air on it, or the not cold air, because it's a Hellcat airbox with a Hellcat air filter and the snorkel on the car, we've probably bypassed the pulley because that is a little bit invasive. But we've gone ahead and gone with the long tubes because why not? And the car's got a tune. What else can you do to the car after that? Well, not a whole lot is the answer to that question. Not without really digging deep into your wallet. By the way, for you Hellcat owners, I didn't forget about you. So the throttle body, you'll see some torque, really won't see any horsepower, although it's not detrimental to horsepower. Most of the time, cars will not throw a code. Hellcats are known for throwing codes for kind of hard to explain reasons sometimes. And a lot of times, or I should say at one point in time, Hellcats were throwing codes with aftermarket throttle bodies. I think a throttle body like the Fastman ported, the true through-ported stock throttle body, I don't think you're going to run into any problems with those. In fact, that's what we ran on the car that we did the testing with. And never ran into any problems with that. So for what it's worth, is it going to hurt anything? No, it'll help torque, help partial throttle tip in torque. So basically it has the same effect on a Hellcat as long tubes do on a Scat Pack. And by the way, same applies, same costing applies for the Hellcat. Might be a little bit more expensive to get a tune put on that Hellcat. But that's really where you're going to see a pretty decent gain. You can put the 309 gear in it if you choose. I think that the car should have come from the factory with the 309 gear, but that's just me saying it. Drive shafts and things like that don't really come into play unless you're really driving that car hard at the drag strip, getting that thing into wheel hop, things like that. The main thing is that if you've got a 17 and up Hellcat, you probably don't need a drive shaft. There's a lot of guys running deep into the 10s with that stock drive shaft with no ill effects whatsoever. But anyway, we basically made it to the middle of the car. And let me check in with you guys. Alberto's asking, hey, B, what about the Edelbrock Victor intake manifold on a 392? Man, okay, so that's one thing I didn't really want to try to get too deep into. I probably should have known I'd be talking about this. I don't like them. And I don't want to talk ill of a product that I haven't used on a 392. I've only been involved with that manifold on stroker combinations. So really, I can't speak to them on a 392, primarily because it would be, in essence, the same as putting a 6.1 manifold on a 392. And I don't see the logic in that. The 6.4 manifold is going to flow better down low. In other words, you're going to get better torque production down low with those real long runners. And then up top, you've got a short runner actuation that will help you to carry that power up on the big end. Now, where I have seen some gains with that intake manifold is through the mid-range, which is not without its merit, but if it's only through the mid-range and it doesn't really pick up any power or loses power with a stock cam, then that's going to be a bit of a problem. Now, when you go with an aftermarket camshaft, that's kind of where that intake manifold will start to come into its own. And here's where I've got to say that so will the stock manifold. I mean, anytime you put an aftermarket camshaft into one of these cars, and we're going to get to camshafts here in just a second, guys, but anytime you start messing with an aftermarket camshaft, it makes the intake runners less active, which bumps up their efficiency range. It extends their RPM range. So there's at least that to consider. But I mean, you got to tell me, okay? I did a video on that manifold and I was showing just how rough the casting is. I think I had made mention about how heavy the thing was. I mean, you're adding weight to a car that's already heavy in the exact spot where you don't want to be adding weight. And the results, although not terrible on that 426, a lot of that was attributed to the fact that the cam that went in that car was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And yeah, it was one of my cams, but it wasn't so far removed from what you would expect to see in a 426 cubic inch, street performance application. So, I don't know that it's worth the $1,000 or $1,100 or $1,200 that you would spend on the car when you've got a very serviceable manifold on there already that works in both the very low end and the very high end, which is actually more to the point because these cars are barges, man, and you got to get these things moving, and you need as much torque as you can get out of the thing down low, and then whatever you can make it make up top with that cam profile that helps you to build torque, well, that's just a bonus unto itself, right? So, do I recommend it? I can't picture a combination where it would actually be better. But I will say this. If you ended up deciding to build a fairly high compression 5.7, then that manifold would be pretty trick. Just because there's no short runner valves for the 5.7 cars. So believe it or not, I would actually think that it might be better for the smaller displacement engine than the bigger displacement. And that would even include the 426s, even though it does well with a pretty big cam. Yeah, Bobby's saying there is no 2021 SRT. That's what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, I don't know if it's an SRT, but I get the idea. Frederick's saying, what's cooking me? You got the ball gown, the shades, and the arm flex. I like it. Mark's saying, the first really major mod I'll probably do is the long tubes. Good mod. Decent power, and they also make a V8 sound like when it, I like when it fries the elderly when you go wide open throttle. I don't know, some elderly prefer it. So speaking of cams, let's talk about cams. This is going to be the elephant in the room no matter what. All right. So if you've got a Hellcat stock boost, don't put a cam in the car. It's not going to do enough for you to build power, and it will lower boost, which you would expect a cam to do. But the problem is that it'll make the car feel softer. And what I have been really a big proponent of is if you go with the cam, you have to re-pulley the car. You have to. And you need to get that boost back, because if not, it's just going to act like a softer version of what you had. Even if it makes more power, it's still going to be a little bit soft. You need to re-pulley it and get the most out of that camshaft. Now, let's talk about the NA cams. It's difficult for me to put into words how much, or how easy, I should say, it is when you're putting a cam together for one of these 392s to ruin the driving experience of that car by getting the cam timing events wrong for a 392. Wedge motors are very forgiving. They just don't really seem to care. They've got very, very good thermodynamic efficiency, meaning that when the spark plug goes off and the flame front propagates, it doesn't have too far to go, and you can run a very aggressive cam with that type of a combustion chamber design. Hemis, on the other hand, are a tumble port design, meaning the air just kind of falls into it. And so because of that, the air velocity is very slow to begin with. It's a reason why you have to have those obnoxiously long runners. If you put a camshaft in a Hemi that looks anything remotely similar to what you would put in a LS platform, even as a mild grind, that is going to be a pretty big cam for a Hemi, because the heads flow unbelievably big numbers. That's great for making horsepower, but it sucks for tip-end torque, and it sucks for bottom-end torque and drivability if you go too aggressive with the cam. Believe me, I know. In fact, it's because of that exact issue that I got into putting cams together for 392s. So, how much does it cost, and how much power can you gain? Realistically gain, all right? So, to the rear wheels, you will gain and this is above and beyond your normal full bolt-on setup. Okay, so if your normal full, let's say if your stock car on a 248 dyno, I'm using dyno jet numbers because I know those are easy to work with. Mustang dynos can get a little bit convoluted, so I'm just going to use a generic Mustang dyno number. Your results will, I guarantee, vary. A stock car is going to put down 420 horsepower on that dyno jet, okay? With a tune and exhaust and the cold air and everything else under the sun, let's say that that thing now, instead of making 420, makes, I don't know, 445 or 450. So you pick up 30 horsepower to the rear wheels on a dyno jet, so take the result for what it's worth, but you pick up that amount of power, 30 horsepower, 40 horsepower, whatever the number is. Let's call it 35 just for the sake of argument. A good street cam, something that is going to pick up power on the back half and have good bottom end torque, drivability, the whole bit. Basically make the engine think that it's just bigger in general. Like the sniper cam, for example, that is going to pick up on that same dyno jet. If you were at 420, then you got the thing to, 455 with your bolt-ons. You can expect that car to make somewhere around 480 to 490 to the rear wheels with that type of a cam. I know that that is not the sexiest thing that there is to talk about, but you have to remember that the entire package was worth 70 or 80 horsepower to the rear wheels. That's not an insignificant jump in power. So just know that coming into it. The cam itself, and this is just the same for LSs. I mean, you're not going to put an LS, you're not going to put a cam in an LS without doing the long tubes and everything else, maybe some intake and all that. So you have to understand that the cam itself, after you've done all that work, isn't going to add a ton of power, but what it typically will do is double whatever all your bolt-on plus a tune and everything else got you in the first place. So in saying that, yes, you can have a cam that makes more than that. I know a lot of guys talk about 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, and that's going to be a big deal. And it's like, guys, look, I can make a dyno read whatever you want me to make it read within a certain amount of reason. There's some percentage points that you can't go outside of, but within standardized parameters, you can fudge those numbers quite a bit, which happens to happen a lot, which is one of the main reasons why I started this channel to begin with, because I got sick and tired of all these BS claims. So, don't really expect too much more power than that on a dyno jet, though. And what does that translate into? Well, that amount of power in a 1320, in a stripped down 1320 or stripped down scat pack, is going to translate to somewhere around high 10s in the quarter mile. Certainly low 11s if you've got a heavier charger in really cold air. And again, you're going to be on a drag pack, and you're going to have obviously some weight reduction going on there as well. But the reality is that even with a fully dressed scat pack on a drag pack, wheel and tire combination, you're going to have a car that runs deep into the 11s in really good air, and you might even get a 10-second pass out of it if you have good enough DA. So not too shabby, right? And that basically falls in lockstep with what everybody else is getting out of significantly modified vehicles. I mean, high 10s is basically your break-in point, and that's really the kind of start and stop point for all of these cars, is that high 10-second range. So is it worth it? Well, strap in, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Now, we talked about cost for installing long tubes and all that other stuff. If you're doing the entire package at once, don't go back and add up all the numbers and that's your build, because there's going to be some things, if you're doing a cam and you don't have long tubes, and there's really no more labor to install the long tubes, because you're just going to install the heads back on the engine with the long tubes attached, and it's actually easier that way. But what does it cost? If you're going to put a cam in your car, budget $6,000. That's just how it is. Chances are it's going to cost you a little bit less. Budget $6,000, because hopefully this isn't your daily. And if it is, shame on you. But if it is, you're going to have to rent a car. And there's that. But yeah, budget somewhere around $6,000, and that will get you the cam install. Now, there'll be other things you could do with it along the way, and that labor really won't be any more than what you're already looking at. In other words, while the manifold is off, you could have it ported. Again, we talked about the headers. They're taking the stock manis off anyway. Really, they're headers. Put the long tubes on at that point. That's a way to save some money and labor. Don't pay for the same labor twice, in other words. So all of that is going to get done at the same time. And I think that would probably be the best way you would want to go, especially for these platforms. But again, it ain't going to be cheap. And you've got to remember that the whole engine has to basically come apart to get to those lifters. The cylinder heads certainly have to come off the car. That's a bit of a problem. And that adds a lot of labor to the equation. So just know that coming into it is not cheap at all. But again, that's really what it costs. Kevin's asking, what do you think about going with long tube headers with catless mids for the RT? I like the idea of the long tube headers. I don't like the idea of going catless. Stick with the metal substrate cats. You'll be fine. They don't cost any power. In fact, we have done so many exhaust tests with these cars, whether it's long tubes with metal substrate, long tubes with no cats, stock manifolds with and without cats, and we can't get the no cat number to really pick up all that much. You might pick up 3 or 4 foot-pounds of torque, but it's over in a heartbeat. It's like done, and you don't ever even see the gain of it. So anyway, besides the metal substrate cats actually sound a little bit better. For an RT, I think it's the best way to go because you're already so shackled with those log manifolds. And of course, you will need a tune with long tubes no matter what. Oh, I forgot to explain why on the long tube. So thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you the reminder on this. When it comes to long tube headers, they make a lot more noise under the hood, and that extra noise drives knock sensors absolutely crazy. The knock sensor is actually listening for a certain sound in a certain pitch range, and those headers, when the exhaust pulses go through them, will ring those knock sensors, and you'll get a bunch of false knock showing up. So without a tune, the short-term knock retard, you could be pulling timing out of that engine left and right. So you absolutely have to have a tune with those long tube headers. There's a transfer function. It's what it is. It's just the computer knows that when it's how sophisticated they are. The computer knows that when the spark plug fires at whatever cylinder, it knows that it takes X amount of milliseconds to get from that firing to the oxygen sensor. That's going to tell the oxygen sensor what is going on with that cylinder in terms of air-fuel ratio, or in the Mopar's case, fuel-air ratio. It means the same thing, but you have to make sure you use the right terminology because that's how the operating system operates. It's how the math is configured. So anyway, if that transfer function is off by a little bit, it can kind of screw with fuel trims. But the main reason why is that if you don't make the changes to the knock sensors, you can actually lose power with those things. Hey, thank you very much, man. Hang on, Frederick. Thank you very much. Thank you for the support, man. Always providing knowledge. Well, thank you very much. Also asking, what about the Warlock cam? Warlock cam's a little bit untested, to be honest with you. It's actually the cam that I would put in my car. It's a little bit more aggressive than the Sniper, but it's not as aggressive as the High Roller. It's going to have a great sound to it. It's going to pick up power basically everywhere. But it's not going to sacrifice a ton of tunability, and it's not going to sacrifice drivability, fuel economy, and everything else that's involved with that. So, it's kind of a tweener, which, it's a bit of a compromise, but you do have to understand that you're going to be making compromises with camshafts anyway. All of them are going to pick up power, All of them are going to fall within that 490 to 510 horsepower range to the rear wheels. So, the Warlock for me is just, like I say, it's just I think it's the better way to go to get a little bit more theater out of the car. But that Sniper Cam's no joke. In fact, that basic cam is the one where it's Quick Bricks cars cutting a 157 60 foot, darn near jerking the front tires off the ground. So, yeah, that cam is no joke. I think the Warlock would be a lot of fun. But thank you very much for the contribution, man. I appreciate you. Oh, this thing is taking forever to scroll back up. Hang on just a second. Hang on just a second. Hey, Quick Break, I saw you just coming in here. Saying with the 392, as you know, it's all about the cumulative effect. My car with cam long tubes and bolt-ons only picked up 70-ish horsepower on the dyno, but is a full second quicker and 7 to 8 miles an hour faster than stock. So that's the main thing you've got to remember, guys, is, really, when it comes to Mopar performance, and this is really what I was going to try to get to, but Quick Break brings it up really well with this comment, is that the sum is greater than the whole of each one of the parts that you get. It's not that the manifold is going to be, that ported manifold is not going to be the thing that puts you over the top. The long tubes will not be the thing that puts you over the top. An E85 conversion or anything else that's done to that car is not going to be what puts you over the top. It's combining the entire package together and sending that off into the world. That is what's going to make that car perform, is the package itself. And that really brings up really more the point that we're going to get to, is what is all of this package really going to cost you? And, we can, roll that number back, but you've got to be able to make that commitment, and you've got to be able to live with the fact that you are dealing with a significant amount of money, but you're also dealing with a significant amount of performance gain. Listen, Quick Brick will be the first one to tell you that if he lines up against a stock Charger, I mean, the crying begins 1.5 seconds into that run, and it doesn't stop for about 11 and a quarter seconds. So, you've got to remember that we're talking about packages that are heavier than luxury cars and trucks used to be back in the day. So you need heavy duty power to get these things moving. And again, each part doesn't get you there, but each part complements the other. And again, it's like a gear. It's like a cog. Any one of those gears missing signifies a significant loss in performance. That's exactly the way that this works out. So just know that coming into the conversation, you've got to be really, when it comes to the 392s and the 57s, you've got to be prepared to commit to the full Monty to get the most out of that car. Just doing a few modifications, a little bit here, a little bit there, if it keeps you involved with the car and it keeps you interested and it keeps the car fresh in your mind, keeps that car in your garage, that's when it's really going to be the most important mod that you do to those cars, or the little mods. But know that when you do all of the mods, the little ones and the big ones, you end up with a significant increase. And in fact, again, to Quick Brick's credit, his car picked up 70 horsepower, and by the normal lexicon of hot rod math, that would have been less than a second being picked up in the quarter mile. And the reality is that car picked up over a second. It's the equivalent in a way of picking up, another 100 horsepower, the way that the car ran, but even more so than that because the car weighs so much. So it's just real difficult to, it's difficult to quantify. I understand that, but it is absolutely true. And we see it over and over and over again with these Mopars. Let's see. Let me get back up here. Sorry, I kind of got a little bit hopping around here. Bear with me just a second, guys. Anthony's checking in saying, what up, y'all? Callus is saying, yeah, the mods do cost a lot, and so does the installation, but I'm learning a lot. Now, you're definitely going to pay for your education in this business. Mark's saying, and just like that, Mason has made me rethink looking up to long tubes on my RT. Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I get it. They're expensive, but the reality is that you probably will do better with them for sure. Oh, Chris is asking, taking my header bolts out to fix my exhaust leak. What are the odds the bolts break off in 6.1 with long tubes? Usually fairly low. I haven't heard of any, at least up to this point. Yeah, and then there's Quig Brick. Yeah, 70-ish horsepower, but a full second, 7 to 8 miles per hour faster in stock, which is nothing to sneeze at. Chris is asking, how much power should a 6.4 with the 8-speed with long tubes, exhaust, and E85 make to the wheels? You know, man, it's kind of tough to say because it's going to depend on the dyno. Somewhere around 450-ish should be about right. You know, so like 450, maybe 465. Would be somewhere in that range on a chassis dyno. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Yeah, 450 to 460. Exactly what I said. Good deal, bud. Chris is asking, stupid question. What is the best way to use slap shift on his 09 SRT Challenger? At usually wide open throttle and shift it at about when the tach is crossing 5,500 RPM. Tim Fastcar saying 11.5, 29.5 DBRs hook up good on the street. Yes, they do. Drag strip is a different traction result. Drag strips are are glued to the max. Tim is saying don't do long tubes. You know, I would say that I've changed my mind on long tubes, but the only reason why I would say I've changed my mind a little bit is just because of the partial throttle gain that you get. If you're only looking for power numbers, it's not going to do any good. You'll be frustrated by the number. I can trust me on that. Complex checking in saying, good evening, B. Got the arm flex. I like it. Quick Press responding to Chris with literally the exact number, which that's pretty funny. Callus is asking about that sniper cam. It is very similar cam to that. His cam is my original CD01 cam, which is arguably probably I don't know. It's definitely the one that I like the most for street use. You can go a little bit more aggressive. Here's the thing. I would put a Warlock in mine. The only difference is that you start running into issues with drivability, I think, at that point. And the CDO1/Sniper is not going to give you any headaches at a stoplight. Whereas the Warlock would probably start to buck a little bit. You would have to bump your idle up to probably 850, 875 with that cam. Let's see. Oh, Frederick's saying, talking to Alberto, saying, I have the Edelbrock Victor intake. He does have long tube headers and a pedal commander to make up for the drivability down low. Said he should have gone with a ported intake. Understand. Quick Brick saying, one good reason to run long tubes with stock cam is if you have plans on running a cam in the future, they definitely don't hurt on the stock cam, which is true, and will help break up expense over time, which is absolutely true. Chris is asking, why is it that Ford and Chevy are coming out with V8s that still pick up serious power with simple bolt-ons, which Dodge still doesn't have, and in a platform that picks up a lot of power with simple mods? Quite simply put, the Dodge is making a lot more power from the factory than those other engines are. Look at a 6.2, for example. A 6.2 is making 455 horsepower, but it's basically the same displacement as a 6.4 that's making 485 horsepower. So you're starting off with roughly the same displacement, making 30 more horsepower at the flywheel. That's a lot. I mean, it's basically crowding a 10% difference. It's like an 8% difference in power, which is a lot to begin with. So when you start to equalize the 6.2 to the 6.4, you're going to be overcoming this 30 horsepower deficit like that because you're putting more appropriate cam timing into the car. That makes a big difference. And so you've got to know that you're just coming from the pushrod point of view, you're coming from a much lower equipped car with the 6.2. If the 6.2 had a cam profile the way that the Mopar does, it would be very similar in power. The LS3 heads or the LT whatever heads that you're talking about, could be any of them really, flow their asses off too. It's just that they're a wedge design or a little bit more efficient in terms of thermal dynamic efficiency. They're not as efficient in volumetric efficiency, but they are more efficient in other ways. And so that's one of the reasons why they pick up so much more power per mod. They're just starting off so low. So think of it like you're just getting equalized more than anything else. When it comes to the Coyote platform, you're really comparing bananas and oranges at that point. It's trying to compare a 4-valve engine to a 2-valve engine is extremely difficult because they have such vastly different performance. Here's the other thing. The 4-valve 4-cam Coyote engine, you can adjust both sides of the camshaft, and where you can't do that with the cam in block architecture. So you can, from the factory, which is kind of what they do, you have this more or less infinite cam profile that's taken place. And that's one of the reasons why Coyotes do so well, is the fact that you've got the ability to have whatever cam profile makes the most power at that RPM. You can't do that with the cam in block. You can only rock it either advance or retard. Huge difference there. And that's another reason why you can pick up with bolt-ons with a Coyote platform, is because you're dealing with a cam that is variable in its profile. That means that you can make scavenging work really well with a set of long tubes. And the list goes on and on. So I would challenge you to not look at the Coyote primarily, when you compare the 6.2 or the 6.4, because again, it's a completely different, it's literally in a different stratosphere when it comes to being technologically advanced, if you will. See, I touched up with Mr. Blacktop. Bobby's saying, talking with Chris, saying, but the Fords and Chevys are no good for big and tall people. The Challenger is perfect, which is a big reason why, by the way, a lot of folks were saying, I want to see the platform get lighter and smaller. And it's like, no, you do not. That's the exact opposite of what you want to see with that platform. Quick Brick saying he's got the CDL1 cam that B. Mason put together, which is this guy, which I believe is similar to the Sniper, which it is. It's fantastic grind and picks up usable power everywhere. It's not super lopey, but it runs great. And that's really the whole reason why it's called Sniper, is because you won't see it coming until it's too late. Tux is asking, where are you, at a hotel? Yep, I am out of town this week. I think I touched up with Frederick about the Warlock. Tux is asking if I know Hot Wheels. I did when I was younger. Oh, cool. You went to a Hot Wheels convention. Very cool. I used to, man, what's funny is that, so my wife and I will, we'll be in like a thrift store. We'll be, doing some picking or whatever. And what's interesting is I'll find Hot Wheels that I remember really well as a kid. And those are always fun. It's like, hey, I'm getting revisited by this, by a long old time friend. So I love it. Good deal. Hold on to those things. Kevin saying, B, on the Charger RT, I know stock, they go about 13.5, 13.2 in a good day. I've got a 10 series Flowmaster, Hellcat lower airbox, and snorkel. I'd like to be around 12.7. It's just a street car. You're going to need a tire for that, and you're going to need a tune for sure to get it into that range. That's going to be tough to get it down that low, but I think it will definitely be fun trying to get it down there. Oh, Daniel's asking if asking about parts to fully adjust camber in the rear of an RT. All I can find are bushings. Is that it? No. BMR and Spawn, it's SPOOHN or SPA, I don't know, some collection of consonants and vowels. But anyway, BMR sells a fully adjustable kit, although it's probably best that you drop the cradle to get that to work. Or get that installed, but they do have adjustable camber bars that you can put on the car, which you will definitely need if it's lowered. But BMR would be the place to look at for that. Good stuff, and it's not overpriced either. Complex is asking drivability of a 392 cam and a 5.7 with short tubes. They run good. The only downside to running the 392 cam and a 5.7 is just that 392 cam has such a wide lobe separation angle. It's just not going to do you a whole lot of good with the 5.7. It'll pick up power, but it's going to be on the big end normally. But they are easy to tune. I would say you would be better off with a custom grind, just a mild custom grind. But if you can get your hands on a 392 cam, they're a good cam overall. Marco Muay Thai saying JBA long tube headers, MOE performance, VVT, HPT plus cam with upgraded push rods, valve springs, phaser. You need the valve springs, by the way. Phaser limiter, Mohs 87mm throttle body, Veraram, intake, true dual exhaust, 5-inch Hemi Fever stage 2. What do you think I will run in my Ram? I don't know who's doing the tuning, but if you're having Matt over at Mohs take care of that for you, that would be very similar. That would basically be a low. Depends on where you live. Low 12s to say mid 11s in really good air, but it's going to depend on where you live. I know the combination pretty well. Those trucks run really good. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. Trust me on that. Tell everybody over at Mohs I said what's up too. Tux is saying, is the 1996 Chevrolet Impala SS a very good car? Yeah, actually it's a very good car. That car is also my favorite old car as well, just a 1996 Sebring. Yeah, the Impala SS is actually a really neat car too. BB's asking, are there any gains to be made for a NAG 1 transmission with a tune? Yes. If so, what can be expected and what would be the effect transmission life expectancy? It wouldn't hurt transmission life at all. It depends on what you're doing with the car, but you can probably pick up at least a 1/10 with optimized shift points. BB's hanging out with Chris. Let's see. Saying the 5.7 inches pick up good power with bolt-on. Seems they they pick up percentage-wise more power similar to 6.4, which is true. And the reason for that is pretty simple. The 5.7 is just choked from the factory. I mean, the 6.4 gets all the love with the manifold and with the bigger cam and the variable runner intake manifold, which why that isn't part of the 5.7, I have no idea. One of the weirdest things ever is to not have variable runner on the 5.7 cars. They have them on the trucks. It's not like they don't know how to do it. Anyway, I digress. When you're talking about the 5.7, it's just, like I say, it's choked from the factory. If you're talking about the cars at 375 horse, man, with just the SRT parts, in other words, just the 392 parts, like the cam, even if you wanted to do that, which I probably wouldn't, but if we're talking about Just the manifolds, the exhaust system alone, I think probably pick up 10 or 15 horsepower just with that alone. Get those logs off of there. Randy saying he doesn't understand the want or need to hurry up or redo the Challenger and Charger. It still does exactly as designed. Looks like it should. I'm right there with you, buddy. It's kind of hard to beat what's working well, you know. Marco's got the high fives with the arm flex. I like it. Tux is asking about the Porsche Cayman. They had the Triptonic automatic. Marco's saying, I love the 5.7 Hemi. I like the 5.7 Hemi. I drive one literally every day. It's in my truck, and I love driving that thing. Chris is asking, what should I expect to the wheels with a full bolt-on ported intake manifold and throttle body SRT Max Plus cam with trans engine tune 6.1 and occasionally on 100 shot of nitrous? It's a lot of unpack, man. What should you expect to the wheels? Okay, so you want me to talk dyno numbers when there's a ton of different types of dynos, and I don't really believe in the numbers anyway, because I'm the guy that is a dyno operator, was a dyno operator, and understands how they can be kind of screwed with. So let's look at like this. I'm guessing this is a 5.7. Again, because I can't remember all the time. What should I expect the wheels? A full bolt-on ported intake manifold and throttle body SRT Max Plus cam with trans-tuned engine tune 6.1. Hemi Challenger occasionally on 100 shot of dope. So off the dope, you're looking at on a dyno jet, and again, this would be, you know, like a 248C dyno jet. You would be looking at somewhere in the range of about 475 to 485 uncorrected in really good air. I mean, that's actually being pretty real with the number. I'd say 475 in good air. On a 100 shot of dope, add 100 horsepower to that, so 585 to the wheels. On a very, very friendly dyno jet. Now, don't take that number necessarily to heart. I've seen those cars put down less, and that would be the most you would ever really expect. Full bolt-on. Oh, even with the cam. Sorry, saw the cam in here. SRT Max Plus cam. It's still not going to drive you over the 500 horse mark. You're still going to be somewhere in that 485 horse range, I think. I just haven't seen one. Well, no, I take it back. Yeah, because, God, it's so hard to quote dyno numbers because, like, you have to be on a 248 to get a baseline. And if you get your baseline, I can at least get you close to that. But the thing is that each dyno reads a little bit differently. In fact, I wish I had it here. I'd show you that, you know, well, take Quick Brick's car, for example. Stock, it made 420, 430 horsepower to the rear wheels on a dyno jet. Well, it's not uncommon for some dyno jet, the eddy current dynos, to actually have a stock car put down 390, 385. And believe me when I tell you, if you give somebody a dyno sheet that says 385 horsepower versus 425 horsepower, that's going to be a bit of a problem, right? That's a huge number difference, but those are the numbers that I've seen. Now, are those outliers? Yeah, maybe. That's why I try to typically say that the 6.4 cars will make 400 horsepower to the rear wheels, give or take, depending on what dyno you put them on. And if that's the case, then you can pretty much run that number back and say that they're going to make about 350 to the wheels on, you know, again, depending on the dyno that you're working with. You know, add roughly 100 horsepower for everything you've done to the thing, and that puts you at about 450, but some dyno jets are going to be a little bit more accommodating, and so now you're looking at like 485-ish horsepower. So that's where those numbers are coming from. But just, it's one of those situations, man, where the more you know, the more you can kind of, you know, mind F yourself. Even if you know what you're doing, you've still got to chase that answer with a caveat saying it just depends on what the dyno would have given you for your baseline. So again, I try to be as real with you as my experience will let me be, so I can give you all the knowledge that I can. I mean, you are really looking at about a 50 horsepower deficit over a 392. So, add 100 horsepower to that already, you're probably at like 5.25, 540, depending on how the tune is set up. And that's still that's a damn nice chunk of change. It'll be a whole lot of power for your money. Let's see. Tux is hanging out with Marco. He likes the TRXs and SRT10s. They are nice. Tux is saying, I wish there was an SRT8 Ram truck. You and me both. Oh, BB saying, he's talking to Chris Harris. His 6.1 is in the shop for the SRT Max Plus cam with LMI intake and JBA headers. Hopefully have it back this week. I'll report his dynos. Please do. I would like to hear about that. And then Randy's hanging out with Tux. Yeah, so getting back to what we were talking about before with the mods, cap back exhaust on a 392 is kind of hard to quantify, but in terms of power, what'll it pick up? I don't know, 0. A little bit of power here and there, but it's not going to pick up a ton. I mean, like I say, it might pick up 2, and that's being very generous. You can run into clearance issues, so just be aware of that. If you put a one-piece drive shaft or something like that, which you really shouldn't have to do with the NA cars, aftermarket exhaust will start to get in the way of that. So just be aware. And the rest of it, you're just going to be down to weight loss at that point. If you've got a Hellcat, just put a 309 gear in it and call it good. And get the thing tuned. And that's going to put you in the best spot. If you have a Hellcat and you decide to start going with mods like pulleys and fuel and all this other stuff, we can talk about Hellcats on a separate video. It's really the topic for another video, which will be Hellcat mods only. What works, what doesn't, which direction to go and why. I try to incorporate some Hellcat stuff every once in a while. But really this is more for my NA brothers and sisters out there. And listen, I flew that flag for a long, long time. And most of you guys on this channel, I think, probably came to me by way of the NA stuff. And it pains me that Mopar doesn't support the NA crowd, but it is what it is. And we try real hard to keep flying that flag and keep winning those races and keep that street cred alive. So with that, you've got to play your cards right, and you've got to put the right mods together. Now, you can overcam one of these cars. It'll make it a turd to drive on the street. Cams for these cars, less is more. And that's kind of the overwhelming value of modifications with these cars. Keep the mods sane. Don't think that you're being cool by putting some big old cam in your Hemi. It's going to run like ass, and you're going to wish like hell you hadn't done it. Stick to the recipe, and that dish will be as sweet as pumpkin pie. Get away from the recipe, and, well, you're on your own. And with that, guys, I'm coming in at about 1 hour and 15 minutes and change. I got to wrap it up because I got to wake up crazy early in the morning. But I want to thank each and every one of y'all. It's my privilege to get to spend time with you guys. Love each and every one of you. Couldn't do this without you. And with that, be safe out there, folks. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep her shiny side up, and we will catch y'all on the next one. That's a wrap. Adios.